On 16th March, Chief Election Commissioner of India, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, announced the schedule of general elections. The general elections will span almost 80 days and the result will be declared on the 4th June 2024. So basically, at present, we are in the midst of general elections. We are electing the people who are going to run this country effectively for the coming 5 years. So considering the important task which these MPs, Member of Parliament, are supposed to do, it's important to understand how these people are elected and what is the procedure in place. So the day Chief Election Commissioner announced the schedule of election, Model Code of Conduct came into force. Now it becomes important, we will refer Model Code of Conduct as MCC for the next 4-5 minutes. So it becomes important to understand what this Model Code of Conduct is, how did it come into force, and how did it evolve. It's interesting to know that Model Code of Conduct has not been passed by any lawmaking body like Parliament or state legislature. It has rather evolved as a custom, as a practice which has been accepted and respected by all political parties and stakeholders. So where did the MCC was born? How did it start? It all started in Kerala. So I will refer Kerala as the mother of Model Code of Conduct. So what happened in Kerala? Why was it so interesting? Post-independence, Congress was ruling the country. Congress could just not lose any election. Election would happen and Congress would win. But the first breakthrough came in Kerala. So what happened in Kerala? In Kerala, communist parties post 1957 state assembly elections came together and formed a government. That was the first opposition government which was formed in India. That government, although did not last long. In 1959, that government was demolished using Article 356 of the Constitution of India. That was the first time presidential rule was imposed on our state. So another first. So this happened. So in 1959, they did not have any state government. So the elections again happened. So when the state elections happened again, they observed certain rules, like rules about not giving speeches which will create hatred in between the religious communities, hatred on basis of caste. So when these rules and regulations were observed between the political parties, the Model Code of Conduct was born. In the general elections of 1962, which happened at the national level and again Congress won, in those elections some basic rules of speeches, electioneering were distributed among the political parties. So this is how the Model Code of Conduct was born and was taking shape in the initial shape. Fast forward, the country came to 1971. So in 1971 again Congress won, but something special happened in Uttar Pradesh. It's a place where special things always happen, particularly politically. So in the parliamentary constituency of Raebareli, Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was very famous at that point of time, contested the MP selection and she won with a thumping majority. But difficulty happened. She defeated a freedom fighter and socialist leader Raj Narayan. So Raj Narayan got very angry and Raj Narayan said that the win is not fair and she used corrupt electoral practices as has been defined in the Representations of People Act 1951. He filed an election petition in Honorable Allahabad High Court and the petition was given a number 5 of 1971. His case was eventually fought by the legendary Shanti Bhushan. Mrs. Gandhi's case was fought by, again, equally legendary Mr. Nani Palkhiwala. And eventually the judgment was passed by Justice Sinha. In the judgment dated 12th May 1975, Justice J. M. L. Sinha held the following. Firstly, he held that the election of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the sitting Prime Minister of India, was void. First. Second, she had committed corrupt electoral practices as defined under Section 123(7) of Representation of People Act 1951, and he held her disqualified for the next 6 years next 6 years to hold any public office, which includes obviously the office of Prime Minister. So basically, this judgment removed Mrs. Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister of India. Obviously, there was a lot of outcry against Mrs. Gandhi after the judgment. Not that the country was silent. A lot was happening even before the judgment. There were a lot of agitations happening in the country led by Jayaprakash Narayan. So the judgment was challenged in Honorable Supreme Court and the stay application, the stay on the judgment, that application was decided by Justice Krishna Iyer on 24th June 1975. I am taking the date because the date is very important, and the judge and the stay order simply said that Mrs. Gandhi could remain the Prime Minister. She could go to the Parliament, she could sign the register, but she could not vote as a member of Parliament. So basically, she got her position back, but with some slight restrictions. And on the next day, that is 25th June 1975, national emergency was imposed on this country by Mrs. Gandhi and her cabinet with the permission of President of India, which remains very controversial to the date. All the big leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan, Atal Bihari were arrested. Even to the date, if you listen to the leaders of the present ruling party who were the opposition leaders then, they cry about being in the jail, then not being allowed to attend their mother's funeral and all those things. The emergency lasted for 2 years. It was very notorious for violation of human rights, and the infamous ADM Jabalpur case also happened during the emergency. On March 21st, 1977, the emergency was lifted and general elections were held. And this time, after the High Court and Supreme Court, people of the country spoke through their ballot paper. And this time, Raj Narayan defeated Indira Gandhi with a margin of more than 50,000 votes. So, election gave justice to Raj Narayan eventually. But after this, the Model Code of Conduct was modified. A new chapter 7 was added, which was party in power. The rules were made because, as had been seen in the case of Mrs. Gandhi, the rules were made for the holders of public offices like ministers, prime ministers, that once the Model Code of Conduct comes in play, they can't use their office, their residence, their powers for the purpose of elections. They can't use their authority to win the elections. So this chapter got added, and the last chapter, the 8th chapter, came into existence with a very interesting development. What happened in Tamil Nadu in 2006 state elections? DMK promised that if they win the elections, they will distribute colored televisions to all the households which don't have them. A gentleman called Subramaniam Balaji was agitated. He filed a petition in Madras High Court saying that this is a corrupt practice. Madras High Court held otherwise, and the gentleman eventually came in Supreme Court. Supreme Court also held that the promise to distribute TV, color TV, CTV is not corrupt practice, but they went ahead and said that Election Commission can sit with the stakeholders and, using the power under Article 324, frame some guidelines which can make these election manifestos and election promises somewhat reasonable. So the 8th chapter, Guidelines on Election Manifesto, entered the Election Commission's Model Code of Conduct. So this is the Model Code of Conduct and its history. So we are in the midst of general election and the whole of the country is observing the Model Code of Conduct. It becomes necessary to think how this Model Code of Conduct can be enforced in the country. So on paper, the first thing is said that it's not enforceable. But if we scratch a little, we will find that there are multiple ways by which these Model Code of Conduct is observed. In Chapter 9A of Indian Penal Code, there is a different chapter called Off Offences related to elections, which provides punishment for bribery, impersonation related to election. There is a Chapter 7 of Corrupt Practices and Electoral Offences in Representation of People Act 1951. And that particular chapter has evolved with the time. Booth capturing became very prominent in 90s. So in 1989, section 135A came, which prohibited and punished booth capturing. Similarly, the whole business of publishing exit polls just before the elections and trying to shift the mood of the people became very became a became a topic of criticism, and eventually a change through section 126A came in the act and it was prohibited. And finally, Supreme Court and the High Courts have been playing an activist role. In Lily Thomas versus Union of India, in this judgment, the Section 8, subsection 4 of People of Representation Act 1951, which gave a window to convicted MPs and MLAs of 90 days to file an appeal and not to get disqualified from their membership from the respective houses. In that judgment, Supreme Court held that window to be ultra vires of the Constitution, and held that once you have been convicted, you are automatically disqualified from the membership of Parliament unless your conviction is stayed. Usually, after the conviction, sentence is suspended and person comes out on bail. But to remain as a member of Parliament, your even conviction, judgment, and the order has to be stayed. And finally comes the necessary changes in the Model Code of Conduct. Model Code of Conduct has evolved with the time. It's not something which was made in day one. As we are witnessing the general elections, there is a trend that Model Code of Conduct for these general elections came into force on 16th March. And on 21st March, elected Chief Minister of Delhi and head of Aam Aadmi Party, which not only rules Delhi but also Punjab, was arrested by Enforcement Directorate. His arrest, particularly during the election and when the Model Code of Conduct is enforced, has been a source of criticism, not only in India but abroad as well. A lot of people are saying that his voice is being suppressed, and him being in prison makes elections difficult and electioneering difficult for him and his party. Few months back, elections happened in our neighbor Pakistan, and they did the same thing with their opposition leader, Mr. Imran Khan. His even party was denied their symbol. So independents with the name of Imran Khan fought elections, and they fared really well in the general election. And it's so if the numbers are to believe, that out of 336 seats in the National Assembly, Imran Khan's candidate won 149 seats. They could not form the government, but they performed really well. Had Mr. Khan been out, a lot of people think, and there are observers who are saying that if he had been out, he would have formed the government. So basically, a country's destiny has been changed by the arrest of opposition leader. That's why change in Model Code of Conduct becomes necessary, and there shall be an addition in terms of protocol to arrest constitutional post holders and head of opposition parties when the Model Code of Conduct is enforced. Under this protocol, permission of Election Commission shall be taken before any law enforcement agency like ED or CBI arrest a person of constitutional post holder or head of political party. Otherwise, there is a risk that elections will be decided before even the first vote is cast, and that would be the death of democracy. So it's time the Model Code of Conduct evolves as it has been evolving for the years and decades, and a new chapter is added. That's all for the day.